Welcome to another edition of Consensus
Unreality.
Reality.
Yeah.
Intro in the books.
We're back.
That's true.
What were we talking about last time? David Lynch?
We were talking about David Lynch. I mean, we've been kind of stuck on the event horizon of the ufological question, which kind of brings me to the short ad that I'll do, since this is aiming to be both a public and Patreon episode. 5 years of Consensus Unreality is
Almost.
Yeah, about this summer. He's got to stop me in my tracks. Classic.
Well, let's
He's
just
derailing me.
Let's just be, we should be accurate. That's crazy. Time
5
flies.
years. This summer, Ben's getting nostalgic, obviously.
I'm crying.
Our full episode archive and new episodes on patreon.com/consensusunreality. We have a lot of interviews on the public portion of our show, hosted on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple. But this isn't an interview show. Most of the basis of this podcast is Ben and I going over esoteric subjects, and I don't just mean subjects that come from the esoteric field, but I think that we do a unique job of covering things that aren't really covered on other shows. And I think we've done that with the ufological question as well, pretty well, on this pod of ours. I'm pretty confident that we've covered a lot of different angles. Things like Kenneth Grant's outer gateways and how it relates to the ufological question. Ontological, how does Mark Fisher's writings relate to the ufological question? Well, I guess we'll dabble in that a little bit tonight. We've covered the long-standing pulp history of the occult and ufology through countless encounters with the contactee movement, the alien abduction movement. We spoke about John Mack recently. We touch the classics, and we also speculate on the quasi-spiritual ecology of the occult and ufology. Why spend money on supporting a podcast? I know it's kind of an annoying thing, but it does take work, and we're not trying to get rich off of this show. We both have day jobs and other pursuits. We're just trying to get a few bucks to continue to fund our research and this hobby of ours, and I think that we're kind of not really engaging the expected influencer space of, we've never really posted pictures of ourselves, and we're not really trying to do a video podcast that just kind of jams you up with nonsense and ads and all that business. We're happy servicing a small esoteric community, much like the zine publications that we cover, the ufological magazines that were sent out to hundreds of people and stuff like that. So, right. That's my case as to why I think you should consider supporting our show, signing up to our Patreon for just $5 a month, which is about the cost of, an orange juice or something.
An egg.
Yeah. And, go back and revisit 5 years worth of our full episode archive, where we cover all those diverse and genuinely esoteric subjects. That's it for the ad portion of the show.
That's a great pitch.
Yeah, that's the pitch. I thought about it.
I'm going to make mine, though.
Uh-oh.
I have a good pitch. If you subscribe to our Patreon, it's good for your karma. And I know you're all aching in the karma department. You're aching. You can feel it. It's that pit in your stomach. It's your bad karma. And $5 a month, you'll feel that ache vanish. The karma will be released, and you'll get to listen to all kinds of stuff about ascended masters, perhaps, or the denizens of the UFOs, or the UFOs as living entities themselves. All of this and more can be at your fingertips for the price of the release of your debt to the universe.
Wow, that is also a pitch. Those lodges, those white and black lodges have they never went away, huh? I love that
No,
there's
they're
still
still
kind of
lodged.
theosophical chatter within the ufological conversation.
There has to be. Yeah, I'm trying as hard as I can, but I can't remember where I was looking at something about theosophy and UFO. It might have just been looking at the Secret History of Twin Peaks again, the book. I found a copy of it recently, and now it's like $100 book, which is crazy to me.
Hmm.
But I have my own, but I found one out in the wild to sell, and I was looking through it again, and yeah, that's still very much in the air. If you watched Twin Peaks: The Return, or even just the original Twin Peaks, that connection is as alive today as it ever was. The connection being between 19th century occultism and 20th to 21st century ufology.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
yeah,
I've been like taking I kind of looked at a lot of disparate things for this episode, and I'm pretty excited about it because my spiel lately has kind of been that I feel that a lot of people are experiencing extreme burnout with the UAP apparatus that's being expounded out there. Understandably, like I think the
yeah,
word that I constantly use is that it's kind of like a kaleidoscopic refraction of a lot of different mythologies and weaponized motives. So yeah, I get the burnout and the lack of finding definite answers or anything you can really lean on in the subject. But I think that if you begin to let that go and sort of approach the idea with an openness that it is kind of like conceptually about reshaping how we think about our world and how we relate to the world, as opposed to getting a simple answer of what these things are. Like, obviously, the extraterrestrial question is kind of thrown out the window, but I think it just means so much more than that. And I'm not saying that that doesn't mean that it's also completely being utilized to garner funding for nefarious, ghoulish black projects and the like it always has. And we'll definitely touch on some of that as well, because I watched an interesting little YouTube documentary about the Cold War that never ended, and the new
yeah.
atmospheric space war that is proposed to be going on right now between the superpowers of the world.
I saw that too. Yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty good, huh?
it's
Definitely
fine.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and it's nice to have all that stuff in one place. Like bringing in the drone stuff as well, and like this newfound attempts by these superpowers to dominate the atmosphere and the extra atmospheric domain with their satellites and drones and such. Yeah, no, it's interesting. And how that relates to the UFO thing is right now, of course, extremely important because, as I think we've mentioned on the show before, there's a pretty direct relationship between investigations by the military into so-called UAP and air defense and space defense technologies. And it makes you wonder if that is really the part, at least, part of the whole story of UFOs back to 47 or whatever.
Mm.
I think not. I think it's probably related, but I think we're at the height of it being a smokescreen for a military thing. I think, well, maybe not. Maybe it's always been that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that's my issue with it is I think that you can't really lean into it either way because it's all of the things. Like, I think that
Yeah,
the
right.
idea that our government really knows as much as we do about this in a way ontologically is true because Blue Book really kind of did say that there's something, but we don't know what it is, in a way, and the
Yeah, but could they
Hynek
be lying?
report as well. Um, Yeah, I think, but you know that, like looking at the landscape of the phenomena through, the weird, um, I don't know how to put it, but psychological abduction encounters, and sightings, and the way that it relates to religion and mythopoetic hyper objectivity, and all of that business. I think that it's easy to tell that there is something, and we'll kind of. I would like to go into some areas of what people focus on those things might mean, whether it's like
Sure.
an emergent property of evolution, certain.
Right.
So I wouldn't call them tropes, but certain touchstones have been passed around, as what the archetypes of the phenomena might be. And I think that we can sort of deconstruct some of those, because I know they get tiresome, but they are also like pretty interesting when you think about it.
Yeah. Well,
And
any of this gets tiresome.
yeah, but then of course, there's also the aspect that like, because it's such a potent question for humanity, I mean, really at it's like defining your place in the universe, and through
Sure.
symbology in a way. And like, I mean, that's kind of big for people, right? So because of that, like, it is so easily weaponized, by the DoD, by the CIA, but
Wow.
also by, uh, like even different religious types are getting their hands in the pot with the Collins
For
Elite
sure. I mean,
stuff, and even the sort
they
of
always have.
the Jesuit block of,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then there's also technocratic ghouls, prospecting the arena as well, right?
For sure. Yeah. Um, I guess it is kind of interesting that the religious approach to UFOs, which for so long was, you know, either these aren't real or these are demons, and that's it. Like that was sort of the blanket approach of, I guess, in terms of the books that were being published on the subject. Like we never really got a great like Muslim or Jewish book on UFOs, like and what they could mean in those. But like for the American evangelical community, UFOs were demons, and they might have like incredible cover art, but the books usually are just saying like, you know, these are demons. So it's cool to see like this weird messianic Christian Jesuit Catholic thing emerging, like really like, and I don't know if she's the one who like created it. I would think that that would be far fetched, but mostly through the work of Diana Pasulka,
But that
and
ties
sort of
back
the people
to
surrounding her.
Pierre Desjardins and
Of
that
course, yeah,
like omega point concept of Christianity, and that's really the moment that, um, Catholicism gets tethered to technology and the industrial age. And I think that was
sure,
kind of
yeah,
that was philosophically the point in a way, an exploration of how that religion can be transported into the industrial age, but also sort of prophetic thoughts in a way by Desjardins. That's really the jumping point for Pasulka's work, and obviously she mentions Desjardins a lot in the book Encounters. It's interesting too. I mean, we talked a lot about the work of, Trevor James Constable, who was a
yeah.
UFO researcher out of Giant Rock, who took a lot of really interesting, um, um,
Photos,
yes, why am I not?
infrared,
Yes, a lot of
yeah,
interesting infrared photos of what appear to be an ecology of plasmoidal, um, UFOs in the desert. But even in getting further into his work, he gets quickly, gets his feet sunk into, anthroposophy. Did I say that right?
anthroposophy, the Steiner thing, yeah,
Anthroposophy and Steiner, yeah.
yeah,
And that whole hierarchy of, a scientific reality of spiritual realms, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, he's a good read. I think he's important, more important than he gets credit for it in terms of where we can go with the UFO subject. Because he kind of brings in not everything, but enough that it feels like those could be source books for the next step in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Trevor James Constable book, The Cosmic Pulse of Life, which is excellent. That also really was relative to A New Science of Heaven by Robert Temple, which we talked about, which is
Right.
a book about plasma physics. I'm kind of doing a sell of recent episodes, but I'm also kind of just throwing things out there that maybe we won't touch on tonight because there's a lot of other random stuff to unpack. But we've this has really been a deep dive in ufology for I think the better part of this year, where we did our Pulp Magic series, which was a lot about 20th century occultism and how it relates to, there's a reflexivity of fiction and reality in that stuff. But
Yeah. And
after
East
that,
meets West.
for sure, yeah. But after that, I think we've really been kind of hitting the ufological question pretty hard in some different ways, and obviously that's what we're going to continue to do today. Even though I think some
Right.
of it might be coming from some unexpected places. I've been revisiting Mark Fisher's stuff in the past couple days, specifically Ghosts of My Life and The Weird and the Eerie. Um,
Yeah. I've read Weird in the Area. I've not read, is Ghost of My Life kind of like a collection of essays?
yes, a lot of it's
Yeah.
related to music stuff.
Right.
There was the first chapter actually really, I think something that we'll talk about on the Patreon is kind of a weird excavation of how this BBC show Sapphire and Steel that he's talking about talks about time loops and the end of history and all that business that is common in his writing. But I also
Yeah.
found a weird similarity there to the end of Twin Peaks, which I'll extrapolate that on the back end for Patreon, another teaser. But one of the things I love that he talks about in The Weird and the Eerie concerning Lovecraft, and it kind of brought something to the surface that I never thought about. But he perfectly puts it that Lovecraft derealizes the fictional and realizes, or I'm sorry, derealizes the factional and realizes the fictional. And an example of this is kind of the fragmentary seeding of the Necronomicon in his books is what kind of enforces its reality, makes it possible for it to be a believable artifact. In that
You mean like by never approaching it directly, but by sort of just mentioning it offhand?
yes, like treating it as
Yeah,
a,
yeah.
as a reality,
Sure,
as
sure.
that literary device, and mentioning it in his writing style as a real thing is what
Mm.
creates the environment that it could be perceived to be real. And I kind of
Yeah.
like I've been also listening to the new Peter Levenda and Tom DeLonge book, Secret Machines 3, which are just fucking. I mean, if you haven't really read a lot of stuff about ufology, they might be pretty good. Because it goes over a lot of stuff that you may have heard. I certainly think they're interesting, and I think Lavenda is an interesting guy. But
Wait, do you think what are they at? Three for Secret Machines?
yeah, it's like
I think that
19 hours long. Like the audio is 19 hours long.
when they do Secret Machines 4, it should be about nanotechnology. It should be called Secret Machines All the Small Things.
Dude, wow, man, that you should have pitched that before you put that on the show, man. I would have sent that
Yeah.
to him in a letter. That's pretty fucking good.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I haven't tackled it yet. Did you finish it? You're just kind of
I just
approaching
started
it.
the new one, the
Yeah.
audiobook in the past couple days. I kind of jump around. Admittedly, I jump around a bit in those because I don't there's some stuff I don't feel like rehashing, that I've kind of heard the tropes, and then there's some stuff where I think there might be new territory. They're referencing everything obviously that's been happening in the past few years, which is, you
Yeah.
know, interesting to get commentary from, especially from Lavenda, who is such an odd character in this whole scene. Um,
We should
but
get him on the show.
yeah, I don't know if that would happen.
It would never happen.
Yeah, it got me thinking, like, you know how there obviously people allege and like to speculate about Lavenda's ties to the intelligence community.
Yeah.
You know, under this lens of Mark Fisher, it certainly tickles the idea that like the Necronomicon could be an operation in testing the viability of realizing a myth. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, sure.
and how that could work in terms of some blue beam type import of the UFO myth. And I don't mean like
Yeah.
a holographic UFO in the sky that like War of Worlds you. I think that if there is a reality of something like conceptually blue beam esque, it's more creating the believability, like the, you know, like in that Mark Fisher sense, like realizing the myth, you know,
That's weird.
hyperstationally importing the myth
Um,
into reality.
that reminds me of, you know, that Joseph Atwill book, Caesar's Messiah? His theory being that like a group of Roman sort of basically intelligence operatives invented the New Testament as some sort of, you know, political or cultural engineering device. It's kind of like that would be almost exactly uh, what living through the creation of that would be like. Would be seeing the Necronomicon become a realized myth.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's crazy to think about. I don't know, that to me, that's that whole idea. There's some holes in that, in the way that, like, I know the what are those movies called? The Zeitgeist movies, where
Yeah, yeah.
like to string together the things a lot cleaner than they actually did fit together. And I think that also kind of dismisses the Nag Hammadi and some of the Essene stuff as well.
Oh yeah. No, I don't think it's an airtight argument. I just think it's an interesting way to think about how how religions and ways of life and thinking are formed. And if you think about it conspiratorially, how that is kind of like how that would look, you know, it would be kind of these are just like a series of psyops that get, you know, old enough that they become myth. But I don't think it's necessarily true.
Right, right. Yeah, and I've also been listening to an audio of I listen to a lot of audiobooks because I listen to headphones at work all day. Um, I've been listening to an audio of the Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch by
Right.
Philip
Yeah.
K. Dick. And I think that there's some, you know, the Candy stuff in there, and the what's the other thing called? It's Candy, and then the second substance that
Yeah.
he
I
imports.
forget.
It's like
So many substances
a reality
in his world.
generating candy, and then something E. I'm forgetting. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, it's this, you know, scenario where Palmer Eldritch is able to create these like pseudo realities, um, and it does, like, I've been kind of indulging the quantum thing a lot too, and just like the how the nature of quantum mechanics like relates to reconceptualizing consciousness, and of course the idea that like maybe, you know, consciousness isn't an emanation of the mechanism of the brain, but it's maybe that the mechanism of the brain is a creation of consciousness. Obviously that's like nothing, I'm not
Yeah.
like breaking ground by saying that, and that goes back to panpsychism. But if we like, I forget who the video was that I sent you by, but it's like a dude who was an early pioneer in computer processors, but then he kind of moved towards consciousness research. And he's talking about how consciousness is a quantum phenomena, and that it can't be replicated because we can't replicate quantum indeterminacy.
Right. That's what I've been saying.
Yeah, that's what you've been saying, man. You've got your guy there, man. Yeah, he's championed you. But yeah, I mean, within that scenario, of course, like then there's the Passport to Magonia by Jacques Vallée trope of
Yeah.
the phenomena wears many masks, you know? And I think we get sick of hearing these things because it's like, all right, well, fucking Bigfoot's a projection by a UFO, and that's an interesting idea. Hear it once, and then you hear it twice, and then you hear it 10 times, and it's like, okay.
Right.
But I don't know, if we actually think about, like, simulacric apparitions, the possibility that, like, I don't know, of what, like, something that exists outside of our peripheral dimensionality, like, I'm not saying that it's like, oh, it comes here to look like, why would it look like Bigfoot? You know, like, why would that familiarize itself to us? But it's like all of that stuff about our own perception shaping the phenomena. I think, like, you have to holistically look at the entire thing. Like, it forces you to look at all of it. Like, it forces you to inspect your own consciousness. It doesn't, I mean, it's funny, like, when, I don't know, when you accept all of the tropes that have been put out there forever, like, you stare into the void and it stares back at you. Like, I think
it does.
what that actually, you know, tends to mean is that, like, when you're trying to look at the phenomena of UFOs and what the hell is this? Is this space people? Like, in reality, it forces you to inspect what your own consciousness means and what the relationship of consciousness to the material world is. And then I think, like, once you just allow yourself to go there, it gets a lot more interesting than, you know, Bigfoots in the woods or spaceships in the sky, right?
Yeah. Well, it kind of the whole thing reminds me of, you know how, like, in Hellraiser, the who's like the main villain character in the original Hellraiser, the guy who finds the
Finn?
box originally.
Oh, yeah.
No, no,
Yeah,
like
the uncle.
the man.
Yeah.
He, like, how he kind of like seeks out these like, so substitute pain or whatever with UFOs. And it feels like you eventually reach the point where you're summoning the what are they called?
Cenobites?
Pinhead. So yeah, you're summoning them by the time, and then, it feels like you start out like, isn't it enough that you're looking at, you see a UFO in the sky or something, and you're like, I don't know what that is. That's insane. Then you get into the literature, and, like, it starts out where you're looking at, like, could it be really men from space visiting Earth? Like, can that really be? And then, like, it's not satisfying the more you think about that. If you really start reading this literature, the deeper you get into it, it's just not satisfying. And which, I don't know, it just isn't. Like, there's no, like, way that really explains the whole breadth of the thing. And so by the end of it, you're, like, in this thing where, like, the only way you can get the fix of feeling like you're reaching any kind of answer is by, like, these more and more esoteric forms of, explanation or, pain, if we're using the Hellraiser thing. And then by the end of it, you're, like, appealing to this, like, extremely Baroque system of assumptions that are, like, you know, uh, ripping your flesh apart figuratively. You know
It's
what I
a
mean?
it's a Garmin Bozic paradigm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That, in a way, that's like an interesting way to relate the Collins Elite frame of thinking, or Twin Peaks style frame of thinking, that there's super beings that are feeding on human pain and suffering, but that the pain is of like not knowing is kind of funny.
Yeah,
My answer to that would be that it's irrational. I mean, like it
sure.
doesn't satisfy the rational frame of thinking. It's not going to satisfy the rational frame of thinking. Um, like our scientific model, it maybe it will never satisfy that. You know, like it's
Yeah,
and it's a lot of that is in the abduction stuff as well. Like I've been listening to a lot of John Mack's classic book, which I talked about on the last episode, but I've been going further into that and listening to some other cases. And the cases specifically that relate the idea of an evolutionary purpose to the others, the beings representing the phenomena,
yeah,
is really interesting stuff. Like there's a lot of ideas thrown around that like, I'm being taught something, but I don't know what for. I don't know what the purpose of it is, but I'm being taught something. I'm being brought along for a higher purpose that I don't understand. That's beyond this life, beyond this world. Um, Fisher was talking about this in relation to the movie Interstellar as well, because there's a part where they're talking about love and what the scientific basis of love is. And one of the characters says something like, what is the point of loving deceased people? Like what's the genetic functionality of loving someone who's deceased? Because you could love
yeah,
to have kids, and then you could love your kids so that they have kids, and etc. But what would be the function of loving a deceased person? Like, is that for some higher, extra dimensional intent or purpose that we don't understand yet?
yeah. That's weird. Yeah, I mean, of course, that assumes the evolution, the truth of evolution, and yeah, and the stuff in Mac and the stuff in a lot of those books where they're talking about it as sort of like humans facing, seeing the face of their own next evolutionary step. Um, yeah, it's interesting, and it also it it ties into this idea of time as well, which I've been looking at Eric Wargo's new book, Becoming Time-Faring, which is it brings in the UFO thing quite a bit, and it's not like a new theory that the UFOs are us from the future or our descendants or something like that. But his approach to the time travel problem is really fresh and interesting. And we've talked about his work on here a bunch and had him on actually as well early in the show. And yeah, I think it's an interesting angle of I forget exactly what there's another book, can't remember its name or the author, but an older book about this idea that UFOs are uh in some way communications from the future. And so I've just started this Wargo book, and he kind of recounts the what is Malachowski, what is that? That box, the box theory, Minkowski, the of block space-time,
Mm.
where uh, if you have the fourth dimension as a another line, sort of equal to the first three dimensions, that the future then is already a definite thing, and people aren't actually objects in space, but they're lines through this space-time block. And so you can start, and that, of course, is terrifying in a way. And I feel like the UFO question ties in pretty directly with this time question, which is really a question about free will. And the fact that that is such a visceral experience during the abduction encounters, I feel that that has sort of something to do here as well. Like I felt so paralyzed, like the language of the alien abduction encounter is often so people feel like they're not human anymore, or they become like objects. Becoming the object to something else's subjectivity is often like kind of the flavor of these encounters when they're not transcendent or ecstatic, but when they're not negative, but more terrifying.
Mm.
And all this, it's all kind of been swimming in my mind, this idea of well, if the future is already sort of set, what Wargo is talking about is communication between yourself at different points in this line that you are, like being able to communicate. Um, yeah, could the things that happen to you when you're experiencing some sort of supernatural or alien event, could they be communications from yourself somehow along this line of yourself? All that kind of stuff has been coming to mind and feels somehow related to this UFO thing, especially given the aesthetic nature of the UFO, which is futuristic, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's constantly at this like carrot on a stick omega point of like a further technology, right?
Yeah, it's always right. Yeah, the airship mystery
Yeah.
kind of becoming this sort of mid-century tin kind of aesthetic, becoming nuclear, becoming, et cetera, until now we get to what we're looking at are these ultra modern, millennial apartment style eggs.
Yeah, true. Well, they're kind of like those. They do have a bit of the aesthetic of Mariko Mori stuff, who we talked about, the Japanese artist on a recent
Right.
episode as well. A visionary. Yeah, no. Considering
Yeah.
the evolutionary thing, I have some thoughts that are kind of interesting on that. I think because I know that trope gets thrown out there a lot, especially considering Jung's book. I think it's mentioned there. Maybe
Right.
the warning shots that the UFO can possibly be this hyper objectal manifestation of our evolutionary desire, our evolutionary push. But I think it's so much
Or
further than
wholeness,
that.
right?
What's that?
Wasn't he talking about wholeness or the becoming
Yeah,
a sort of
the
unified person within oneself?
and there's that omega point as well, like an emanation of the
Yeah,
mandala as the unified um, individual. Um,
yeah.
but I also think like there's the possibility that I like thought of this thing like the Paracelsian, the reemergence of the Paracelsian when you're thinking about like the quantum and the UFO, because like there's all that you get all this anecdotal shit from looking at all this shit for so long, and it's like somebody was like they're operating on me and I went into my bloodstream and I was healing myself, or I took I smoked DMT and I went into my back and healed my chronic pain. Like, but there's also like the idea that you're holistically every atom in your body contains an essence of the whole, like on an atomic level, right?
Isn't
So
that like homeopathy?
yeah, so there's like the Paracelsian like concept of like denizens of different parts of these tiny realities, but
Hmm.
also the evolutionary concept is kind of like there's some quote that arose to me in the Mark Fisher stuff again, where he was interviewing somebody and somebody had said that angels only exist between an agent of progressing the evolution of the ecology of whatever they exist between. And I think that
Theory speak.
yeah, yeah, but it's kind of like I know it's annoying to think of like, oh, the UFO is just like our projection of evolution, but no, maybe it's that our evolution is tethered in a way to the rest of quote unquote reality that is beyond our reality in a way that we don't understand. So maybe that's why there's this. It's not just like evolve and join the galactic confederation or whatever. Maybe it's something more complicated that that I think could possibly be misunderstood and misinterpreted through the Von Daniken lens of, or even the kind of the downloads and stuff. I know that's more of a newer thing that comes out of the Pasulka camp, and I don't think that she's like really purporting to know exactly what or why the downloads would happen. But thinking more about the Von Daniken thing of like cargo cults and
Yeah.
like the Anunnaki genetically engineered humans for this perp for A and B, and they left us here, blah blah blah. I think it's more possible, or maybe it's a useful way of thinking about it, that there is this whole other spectrum of being, and then there's this whole other ecology of quote unquote life that we're related to, although we don't necessarily know or understand that. So maybe that's why there's this sort of like seeding going on, and maybe the things that we do are also, like seeding and influencing this other reality, and we don't necessarily know that either,
Sure, yeah, the fairy thing, basically, right?
Mm.
I mean, uh, yeah, I think that's possible. The more, the longer I spend looking at this stuff, the less uh, kindly I look on the Von Daniken stuff, because while it explains the alien stuff to like a certain degree, it destroys like everything about humanity in the process. Like it turns us into robots in order to explain UFOs, which feels like a pretty catastrophic approach to trying to solve the thing. Although I mean, it's a beautiful like narrative to work with. It's
It's
really
an
interesting.
easy narrative to work with, I think.
Yeah, but
Which
it's like
makes it so
there's a beauty in
potent for
that.
people. And
Yeah,
obviously, ancient aliens banging program for a
right.
lot of folks.
It's great. It's
Yeah,
fun, and
yeah.
it's like easy. The answers are, one of our greatest joys, I think, in life as human beings. It's like a soothing thing, even if the answer is that you're a robot made to mine gold, which is like horrible or whatever.
I like the this terminology that Trevor James Constable uses. He says elemental borderland realms,
Yeah,
and I think that's where I get to thinking about. Again, there's that explanation that people use of occult ceremonial or non-ceremonial magic, where they say that it's exploring aspects of your psyche, which kind of like diminishes it in a way and just makes it seem like this very like paramechanical meditative process. But again, I think that you have to like start to think about the idea that what if like the mechanical is shaped by consciousness, then I don't know. Like it sounds corny to say it. Almost we're getting Joe Rogan hours here, but like, what's real? The thought form explorations, those realms that you go to in deep think or dream states, or what's
yeah,
realer, here or there? Like
sure. That's the question. I mean, even if it is Joe Rogan-y, it's also like maybe this isn't true, but it feels like that's the question that most people ask of reality. The fact that we do this thing every night, like dreaming, or when we sort of meditate or envision things, that internal world is that, yeah, I don't know. It is very stoned dorm room stuff, but it's also
yeah.
it is that because it's very potent, I think. It's like, and it's a question that can't really be answered, at least while you're alive. And so it's like is the dream world where you go when you die? Like it's like being in high school and watching Waking Life or whatever. Is that the movie?
Yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
even like a lot of the simulation movies that I like Fassbinder's World on a Wire, or the
yeah.
13th Floor is the American adaptation of that. Like
I
there's
never saw that.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it good? I
It's a
mean,
little hokey, but I like it a lot actually.
the original is incredible.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're both. I should say they're both based on the same story. It's not that the
Oh, okay.
13th floor is the American 13th floor. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, there's a bunch of simulation movies like that where the bottom kind of keeps falling out, where it's like,
Yeah,
well, we've created the simulation and this is the simulation, but then it's like, well, actually, this is also a simulation, and then blah blah
sure.
blah.
Dark City.
Dark City. I just rewatched that one. That's a fantastic film.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe the bottom just fell out on my frame of thinking there. But
Maybe we could mosey on over to Patreon soon and talk about the real details and really start the real conversation.
yeah, I guess you did perfectly just time that at 45 minutes.
Damn. It's my deep sense of time.
Right. Deep time. Deep time. Yeah, I guess well, we've got plenty more to talk about. Cool. I know that this was kind of a jumbled up song and dance here, but we'd like to get into the speculation. I picked up this book. The Ken Carey stuff, who's done like the Starseed books.
Yeah, sure.
I picked up this one the other day called The Third Millennium, Living in the Post-Historic World. It's kind of prophetic language there from Ken Carey, especially considering all of the Mark Fisher-isms that have kind of been thrown out there on this show.
Yeah.
This was written in 1991, so I guess it's not super soon for those end of history concepts.
Yeah, that was right around that time.
Yeah.
Is history over? It feels like it's back.
History is back. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, with the UFO thing, you can certainly relate all of that because the same Scooby-Doo kind of villains keep getting brought out. But I don't know, like we've kind of speculated on the nature of the language of a lot of the conventional disclosure stuff with the UAP hearings and the whistleblowers.
Yeah.
And I thought, at first there was a lot of really cagey language with David Grush. But I think that was, intentionally so because he was in a congressional hearing. And then I did listen to him on a Joe Rogan interview, and now I don't. It's again confused me even more, but I'm like delighted by the confusion at this point. I don't care. I think it's like,
Yeah.
like I don't know. I've turned a corner where I've like gotten past the point of exhaustion. Now I'm ready for like a bang bang second meal,
Yeah, it's when you accept the disorienting nature of this thing, you kind of I mean it's really just like art. It's like what does it mean? And then you're like, oh, that's not really it.
Right.
It
You like
you know,
David
it is
Lynch
what it
movies,
is.
you?
Yeah.
There's
Or
always a new
yeah.
layer to unpeel.
Right. And that's great.
Uncork.
That's
Cork the bottle.
and
Get drunk.
it's so sturdy.
Yeah.
It's like such a sturdy myth. It's like maybe it's because it's based on like a very sturdy shape of the disc. The myth itself is kind of like a disc.
Yeah. I don't know. Like the history of it too, like it is kind of crazy that it's like this bang bang thing where you get Operation High Jump and then Kenneth Arnold, Maury Island, which I guess a lot of people have consensus is that it's a hoax. But the DC flyover thing actually,
Yeah.
apparently now I saw this on a Vice documentary about UFOs. There's somebody in Stockholm, I believe, who's going through glass plate photographic archives, telescopic archives, like tens of thousands of these glass plate images. And basically they found an anomaly of star-sized objects, like 5 of them in an 8-minute window, I believe, that should not come in and out of the frame as quickly as they do. Like it's scientifically impossible that things this bright would be photographed and then not be in the photograph still 8 minutes later, because that's not how like supernovas work or whatever. And strangely enough, this person found that this imagery coincides with the apparent DC flyover.
That's weird.
I know, it's crazy,
So,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
They proved it.
maybe. I mean,
Who was president at that time?
that was in the 50s, I believe. So was
Yeah.
that Eisenhower? Maybe.
Maybe it was. That would be cool.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there like I won't like. It's hard to just say that this is all some psyop because there's a lot of like independent people looking at this thing very hard, and like
Right.
once you penetrate those layers, like it just is so complex and kaleidoscopic. Like there's no easy answer about even culturally what it is, like the cultural import of it. not even
There's
getting
no way
into the
out.
phenomena itself.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Once you're in it, it's like you're stuck.
We're going to find a way out of the public portion here. Thank you for listening. Check out patreon.com/consensusunreality. Our fourth edition of our Journal of Shells printed journal is about going to the presses. This one is going to be heftier than ever. It's where we present archival, occulted texts, ufological things, poetry, art, sounds, and yeah, it's a printed journal. It's limited to our print tier on Patreon, which is $10 a month. We also send some bonus printed items and soon recorded materials as well. So check that out, patreon.com/consensusunreality. Thank you for listening. We will now head over to Patreon for the bonus portion of this episode. That's my Patreon sound effect right there.
Well, we're back.
Yeah, now we get to talk about how this hyperstitionally relates to the new Marvel film, Captain America: Brave New World.
Ooh.
I think it's like one of the funniest things is like it's like I want to see a movie about Project Bluebeam, or I want to see a movie about MK Ultra mind control, or I want to see a movie about Operation Paperclip. Like I think this stuff only kind of comes out in Marvel films. Say what you will about what that means and why that is, but it's kind of
Maybe it's like like second Matrix stuff where it's like it really all just is entertainment.
We
Like
need a
all the
drop for that.
conspiracy stuff. It's like it's all of your theories about that you're really finding out the truth of the 20th century and that you're really just the Third Reich extended. It's all just like your own life, man.
That's true. I think I was gonna say it is like